What is up, guys, and welcome to another edition of the Market Marauder Show, being the market one trade at a time. Hope everybody's having a great week out there, able to lock in some profits. All right, so today we had the CPI numbers come out, as well as Fed Chair Jerome Powell spoke on the outlook for raising potentially the Fed rates. So overall sentiment for the market is pretty bullish. Seemed to be a bullish outcome from the market, replying to, I guess, the feelings from the meeting. Overall, the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell himself said they're going to keep interest rates unchanged and signaled that there will only be one expected rate cut before the end of the year. Also, in the Federal Open Market Committee, also indicated that they believe in the long run interest rates is higher than previously indicated, and so ultimately just one rate cut is going to happen before the end of the year. Definitely very interesting or positive news signaling for a rate cut with the market reaction. So let's jump into some of the details from the data of the Fed meeting, as well as the CPI numbers. All right, so first we're going to start off with the Fed meeting recap. So the Federal Reserve today kept key interest rates unchanged and signaled that just one cut is expected before the end of the year. Within markets hoping of accommodating central banks, Federal Open Market Committee policymakers, following their two-day meeting, took two reductions off the table, with three indicating in March. The committee also signaled that it believes that the long-run interest rates is higher than previously indicated. And also, a new forecast released after this two-week-day meeting indicated slight optimism that inflation remains on a track to head back to the Fed's 2% goal, allowing for some policy loosening later this year. And so, from the meeting, inflation has eased over the past year, but remaining elevated. The post-meeting statement from Fed Chair Jerome Powell, he also said in recent months there have been modest further progress towards the committee's 2% inflation objective. So ultimately, when he said those two statements, the market seemed to react pretty positively about it overall, and I would agree with that situation. The CPI numbers kind of showed that there is some positive change going on in the market. Previous language before said there was a lack of further progress on inflation, but now it seems like there's a positive move towards that. So traders seem to be encouraged with the S&P jumping to a record number today. So if we go to the S&P, we can see it shot up to $544.12. So ultimately, I think that was a positive news for the market. Seemed to be a bullish outward turn. It did fall down slightly to end the day at 542.23, but ultimately I think it was a positive note for the market. We can see the values above the moving average 20 and the moving average 30. So overall positive sentiment from where it started around 532 earlier this week, or towards the end of the close yesterday. And so going into CPI report and CPI report information, which is the Consumer Price Index. Just some highlights from it. We have the headline CPI increased by 3.3% year over year in May versus 3.4% expected by economists. The index was flat month over month versus 0.1% growth expected. Also, then the core CPI increased 3.4% year over year versus 3.5% expected in May. And then on a monthly basis, the index rose by 0.2% versus its 0.3 expected. And so ultimately, what people are saying about the CPI data that came out today is that it showed no increase in May as inflation slightly loosened its stubborn grip on the U.S. economy, and the Labor Department reported today. So the CPI was broad inflation gauge that measures the basket of goods and services costs across the U.S. economy. It held flat on the month, though it increased 3.3% from a year ago, according to the Department of Labor Statistics. So this is a chart showing the difference. You have less food and energy, and then you have all items. So they kind of converged almost around this 3.4 and 3.3% level. So economists surveyed the Dow Jones economy surveyed by Dow Jones have been looking for a 0.1% monthly gain and a 3.4% annual rate, and the monthly rate rose 0.3% in April, while the annual rate was at 3.3%. Excluding volatile energy and food prices, core CPI increased 0.2% monthly and 3.4% from a year ago, compared with respective estimates of 0.3% and 3.5%. And so this is a chart showing the different numbers and the month over month percentage change. And so I think ultimately is a positive note from the Fed, alluding to the fact that there will still be one rate cut before the end of the year. And so following the report, the stock market futures pushed higher while Treasury yields slid. And the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose about 250 points on the morning trade, while 10-year Treasury yields fell to about 4.27%, down nearly 0.14%. Through the top line inflation, numbers were lower from both the all items and core measures. Shelter inflation rose about 0.4% in the month and was up 5.4% from a year ago. And so going to the CPI numbers, this is a breakdown. This is BLS.gov, kind of shows where each item was and how it's broken down individually into their categories. And so we can see over here for May, we have food increased 0.1%. We have energy in this section, which decreased 0.2%. And then the core CPI kind of excludes a lot of these. We also have the commodities, or this is all items less food and energy, was 0.2%. So when you see the core, and excludes food and energy. So just bear that in mind. It even has its own section, says all items less food and energy. And so going to food, the food index rose 0.1% in May after being unchanged in April. The index for food was for food at home was unchanged in May. Two of the six major grocery store food group indexes decreased over the month. Two were unchanged, and the remaining had price advances. The index for dairy and related products decreased 0.5% in May, led by 1.3% decline in the index for milk. The non-alcoholic beverages index declined 0.3% over the month, and the index for food at home and the index for fruits and vegetables were both unchanged in May. Index for meats, poultry, fish, eggs increased 0.2% after decreasing 0.7% in April, and the index for cereals and bakery products also increased 0.2%. So basically, like protein items increased, and then like bread and cereal increased 0.2%. Food away from the home rose by 0.4% in May after rising 0.3% in previous 2 months. And index for full meals rose 0.4%, while the index for limited service meals increased 0.2%. And so this is basically like fast food chains, sit down restaurants. You also have seen some of this with McDonald's executive or president coming out and saying they were going to be offering like meal deals. You have some companies that also came out and released, like Walgreens, that they were going to have discounted or certain discounted items. And so, companies like McDonald's coming out and saying, hey, we understand, from year over year, we increased 40% of our prices. So their prices rose 40% from 2019 until now. So they're trying to mitigate that by having customers still come into the store while having prices that are affordable. And it definitely shows with the inflation rate continuing to rise for fast food or food away from home. The food at home index rose 0.1% over the last 12 months, and the index for meats, poultry, fish, and eggs rose 2.4% over the last 2 months. So the next big sector on here is energy. So just breaking down energy, the energy index fell 2% in May after rising 1.1% in April. So that's definitely a positive change. The gasoline index decreased 3.6% in May. Before seasonal adjustment, gasoline prices fell 0.5% in May, and the natural gas index decreased 0.8% over the month, and the fuel oil index decreased 0.4%. The energy index increased 3.7% over the last 12 months, so it's basically over the year. And then the gasoline index rose 2.2%. The electricity index increased 5.9% over this 12-month span, so it's a pretty significant increase on electricity. And so that's something that will definitely need to be monitored. But then if we go to the index for all items in general, we have the index for all items less food and energy rose 0.2%. So basically everything else rose together collectively 0.2%. That includes the medical care index, which is 0.5%, the used cars and trucks index, which is 0.6%, and then you have airline fares, which is 3.6%. So ultimately, some of the other sectors rose, but they didn't raise significantly. And the two major factors are energy and food. So ultimately, I think what to look for tomorrow may be some bullish sentiment going into the market. Definitely going to be looking to see if SPY continues to rise and if it bounces off this moving average 20 level at $540.15, being at 542.23. I know a lot of people day trade SPY options. Some people do 0 day to entry. Some people do 1 day to entry SPY options. Definitely a very popular one to trade, especially when the market is very volatile. Going to be looking to see what SPY does and how the market overall reacts to this news. I think it's a positive note that we will see some rate cuts coming before the year ends, and the fact that we're getting closer to it, I think the market is looking very bullish for that. Also, if you look at some of the other stocks today, Microsoft and Apple both rose significantly with news that Apple was partnering with OpenAI for their new updates and WWDC that just recently came out. And then Microsoft being a big partner with OpenAI, they increased as well today, showing the strength of AI. AI is still on the table for Wall Street, and a lot of companies are really gung ho on incorporating AI to the current systems that they have. So make sure you drop a comment down below. Do you think the CPI numbers are positive or negative for the market? Make sure you hit that thumbs up. It helps the YouTube algorithm. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.